We're in the middle of a series entitled Extreme Faith Makeover. And we're just looking at this word called faith and seeing how it really does integrate into our lives. What does it really do? Does it live beyond Sunday? Does it really impact Monday? We've been looking at it in Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 1. We're given what I think is maybe the most defining verse on faith in the New Testament. And it says, now faith is the substance of things hoped for. It is the evidence of things not seen. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for. It is the evidence of things not seen. As we've been navigating through the core content of faith, we've discovered that there are some facts. And I just sort of want to revisit a few of these facts so that we can leap forward and take another step today. One of those facts is this, that faith works. We know that faith works because it's how God asks us to live. 3 times in the New Testament it says, and now the just shall live by faith. One of those times is in Hebrews chapter 10 and verse 38. So we know that faith works. But one of the things that the Bible is also clear about, it doesn't work as fast as most of us want it. And so faith works, but it doesn't work as fast as most of us want it. See, we want faith, and we want faith to work right now, right this minute, right this circumstance. But in Hebrews chapter 10 and verse 38, when it quotes from Habakkuk chapter 2 and verse 4, where it says, now the just shall live by faith, it quotes verse 3, and it says, but what if the Lord tarries? What if God's not in as big a hurry as you? Can you still be a person of faith? See, that's the challenge. Many people give up on faith, not because they can't think that God would do something, it's that they can't handle the timing of faith. Another thing is that we've talked about is that faith isn't a magic wand. It's not one of those things that you pull out in a moment of desperation. And when you pull it out in a moment of desperation, you've tried everything else and you take your wand out and then you say the magical words in the name of Jesus, and somehow it's supposed to rectify everything that's going on. Faith's not a magic wand. Neither is it a formula that somehow, if you just are able to take this formula and precisely apply it, and you get it just right in the right moment, that all of a sudden, faith isn't a magic wand, nor is it a formula. It is a relationship with God. Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 6 says, for without faith it is impossible to please him. For he that cometh to God must believe that he is, and he is a rewarder. 5 times in one verse it talks about him. Why faith is first and foremost about him. It's not about all the external things. It's about having a relationship. So faith works, but it's never as fast as you want. Faith's not a magic wand or a formula. It's a relationship. And faith is heaven's building material, which God uses to create his will and his promises down here on earth. So if you would just think of a construction site, I can remember when we were building this building, the first of 7 construction phases. I can remember that it started with just digging a hole, and I was new to the process, and they came and they kept digging the hole, and they'd carry out dirt, and they dug the hole, and they carried out dirt, and I thought, man, we're trying to stop people from going to hell. I didn't realize we were going to dig down to it, but they kept going and going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, and then all of a sudden they start bringing in literally more dirt. And I'm thinking, we dug out dirt so we can put in dirt, dug out dirt. This is a real expensive way for me. And I remember talking to them, and they said, hey, we got to have good dirt. We have to have dirt that can be compressed, and it can handle the pressure, and it can handle the give and take. And so finally, we got all the underground stuff done, and I can remember the day they delivered the first supplies. I was so happy. The first supplies are here. Finally, people can see that we did something other than dig a hole. And the supplies showed up. Well, what we know is that if you're building a building, eventually you need supplies. Well, in your life, the promises of God are God's plan for your life. But you need supplies, and the supplies is faith. And faith is the substance. It's the heavenly material God uses to begin to create his promise, his plans in your life. But that brings us to the next part, and that is faith always needs some hope. Faith needs some hope because Hebrews 11:1 says, now faith is the substance of things hoped for. Everyone say hope. Everyone needs some hope. And so it says, now faith. See, what hope does is it adds perspective. And when I went in ministry 48 years ago, I really thought my job was to convince you to believe. I was going to somehow try to convince you to believe in God above, believe what God could do. But then after a few years, I figured out that most people already believed. If I were to ask the question in this audience, how many of you believe there's a God? Most of every hand would go up. If I were to ask the question, how many of you believe that God could heal? Hands would go up. How many of you believe that God can supply? Hands would go up. How many of you believe that God can bring about change? Hands would go up. It wasn't a believing problem. What I found was it was a hope problem. Because if I went to those same people who believe that God can heal and that God can change things and that God can provide, and I were to ask them, do you believe you're ever going to feel better than you feel today? A lot of them don't. No, they believe God can heal. They just don't believe that they're going to feel better. They believe that God can change a family. They just don't believe their family's going to be any better. They believe that they can literally have God be a provider. They just don't believe God's going to be a provider for them. And so in the midst of everything, what goes on is they believe one thing, but they have no hope. They don't have any hope that their marriage will ever be better, that their kids will ever be better, that their business will ever be better, that their career will ever be better. See, most people don't have a faith problem. Most people have a hope problem. They just don't have any hope. But see, we're not the first ones to struggle with this, because in Psalm 42 and verse 11, it says this about King David. He says, why art thou cast down, O my soul? He's basically asking himself, he says, why are you negative all the time? Why are you just so negative? How is it that you can get up in the morning and you're already gone dark? How is it that before you ever get out of bed, you're already on the edge? Why art thou cast down, O my soul? Why are you always, as soon as you wake up, you're already consumed with the blues? Why is that? He's asking himself a question. He says, why are you despairing? Why are you distressed? Why are you discouraged? Why are you depressed? How is it? Why art thou cast down on my soul? But then he goes on and he says, but God is the help of my countenance. And he goes on and he says, but hope in God. See, he knew what his problem was. People get discouraged when they lose hope. People get distressed when they lose hope. People get depressed when they lose hope. If there is no hope, people lose every perspective and their emotions become negative. And so for some people, that's how they've lived. They lived their life without hope. I need to build a bridge. Let me tell you a story. A few decades ago, I picked up a magazine, and I was just thumbing through it, not thinking a whole lot. And then I came across an article in there. And as I began to look at the title, the article intrigued me. And I thought, man, I'm going to read this and spend some time thinking it through. But then as you began to read, what you found out was it was written by a surgeon. Now, this surgeon apparently did some surgeries that are pretty complex, and they're pretty serious, and that was the nature of what his job was. He was a surgeon, and he specialized in a certain type of surgery that was a pretty intense kind of surgery that people would have. But as you read through the article, there was no indication that this individual was a person of faith, that he believed in God. There was no indication that he was coming from a biblical background on anything. You weren't getting that. But the title of the article was this: I wished I could prescribe hope. See, that's what got me interested. I wished I could prescribe hope. And so the surgeon's going through and he's talking about all the surgeries he's done. He's talking about all the people. He's talking about how he's done this for decades and everything. And then he goes through and he says, I've noticed that hope is so critical in what I do. But I can't prescribe hope. And he talked about, and anyone who's had surgery knows this to be true, then right before they take you back, usually the surgeon will come out and talk to you. And as they talk to you, they'll say and ask some very basic questions. First of all, do you know what we're doing today? Do you know what the goals are today? Because, for legal reasons, they want to make sure there's clarification before you go back there. And then they'll turn around and they'll say something like this, and you understand that there's some risk involved. And they'll go over the risk because medically, and they want you to know what the risks are. And he says, I've done this tens of thousands of times where literally the pre-consult, before I go back in surgery, and he said, I've noticed there's a difference. He says, I can have two people on the same day presenting with the exact same problem. They have the exact same issue. Now, it's different people, but the exact same issue. We're going to do the exact same thing. It's going to be the exact same surgery. And he says, I've literally watched as one person went into surgery and came out and everything went well. Another one went into surgery and he says, there's times they didn't even make it out. And then he says, there's times that they came out and it was just a constant struggle through the surgery. And he said, I never could get it because I knew there was nothing medically that distinguished between what we did. There was nothing about it. This person had the problem, this person had the problem. We did the exact thing. We could show you with medical records, we did the exact thing. This person thrived, this person died. This person did well, this person struggled. And he said, and then it hit me after years of doing this. He said, whenever I'd do those consults, he said there'd be some people where I'd say, hey, this is a risky surgery, there's some chances here and everything. And some people would answer me like this and say, well, you know what? I've got some things I got to do in life. And I know this is a hard surgery and I know that there's a chance of things going bad, but I got some things I got to do in life and I'm going to get on with my life and I'm going to move on with life. And I just need you to know I'm coming through this. And he said, and then I would talk to another person who's dealing with the exact same thing, and they would respond, you know what, I'm so concerned about this. I'm not sure if I'd make it. I'm not sure how I'll handle it. I'm not sure that I can do everything that needs to be done. I'm not certain. And he says, after years of doing surgeries, I've learned the person who goes into surgery with hope does better than the person who goes into surgery without hope. And I'm just sitting there, and there's no reference of God in this. There's no reference of anything at all of him being a believer. He's just given his anecdotal evidence of having been a surgeon. And he said, the one thing that I can't prescribe that I wish is before the surgery, I could write them a prescription for hope. Because what I know is when you go on with hope that you're going to come out and you're going to make it, you're more likely to come out and you're going to make it. But see, the Bible tells us that. Proverbs chapter 13 and verse 12, it says, hope deferred makes the heart sick. It says, when you have a hope that's been distant, that hope will affect your heart. And see, in your life, in my life, a lot of people don't have a faith problem, they have a hope problem. They don't have any hope that their kids are going to turn out any better. They don't have any hope for their marriage. They don't have any hope for their job, their business, their career. And see, hope is one of the foundations. And that's what the writer of Hebrews was saying when he said, but now faith is the substance of things hoped for. You got to have hope. You got to have hope. Now, when the Bible talks about faith and hope, they're twins. They're tied together and they work together. So faith doesn't work without hope. Hope doesn't work without faith. You need both of them tied together because they're the backside of each other. Faith needs hope. Hope needs faith. And the reason being is because they work in two different dimensions. See, faith works in your heart. And for those of you who may not know, you're more than just a head and a body. Your three parts, your spirit, your soul, and your body. You have a physical body, you have a mind, but you have a heart. You have a spirit. Why is that? Because you were created in the image and likeness of God. And according to John chapter 4 and verse 24, it says that God is spirit. You're the only part of creation that was created to relate to God. But what the Bible says is this: faith works in your heart. So at the end of the service, when we ask people, do you want to accept Jesus? What are we doing? We're not asking them if mentally they can figure out God, because I haven't figured out God. We're not asking them physically if they feel God. We're asking them if they want God to come into their heart, be Lord over their heart, to begin to work on the inside and change them. And so we pray Romans chapter 10 in verses 9 and 10. It says, if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe with your heart. Faith works in the heart. That's why some people struggle and they say, well, I can't figure out this faith thing. Faith's not something you figure out, it's in your heart. But on the other hand, hope's different. Because when you go back to Hebrews chapter 6 and verse 19, it says that hope is the anchor of your soul, your mind, your will, and your emotions. See, what faith does for your heart, hope does for your soul. What faith does for your heart, hope does for your soul. And for some people, they need an anchor because their minds will chase every negative. And if you know anything about the mind, you know the mind will go to the darkest place the quickest unless you stop it. And some of you, you've let your mind go to the darkest place the quickest because you've never learned to stop it. You've never learned to say, it's not going there. It's not going to go to the negative. Some of you are massive miracles because you've had all these symptoms and you've Googled them repeatedly and you're dying of 10 incurable diseases all at once. Why? Because your mind's bit into something and it won't let it go. And what God's saying is, you need something for your mind, and that's what hope is. Hope does for your mind what faith does. You need both of them. But the difference is that now faith affects today, hope affects tomorrow. See, the distinguishing is this. You're in a room right now where we have AC and we have a heater. Up in the rafters up here are giant units. These giant units have the ability to take very cold air and make it hot. It has the ability to take hot air and make it cold. They're units. But do you know those units are worthless unless there's a thermostat? You can have a unit up there that can take cold air and you can make it hot. But it's all contingent on that thermostat over there because you've got to put in a temperature that you want it to be. And until that temperature's put in, it's going to sit up there. And that's the way some of you are. You've got this faith in your heart that would love to accomplish the will of God and the purpose of God, but it's down there inside and it wants to give substance to it, but it can't do anything because you haven't learned to turn on the thermostat. But if you turn on the thermostat, all of a sudden that unit knows, hey, I don't need cold air, I need hot air because you've put it in the heat mode, or I need cool air versus hot air because you put it in the AC mode and you've put it in the mode that you need. And then the thermostat begins to set the goal for it. And it says, this is what we're going to do. We're going to get this room to a certain temperature. Now, can you imagine if I built a house and I forgot to put the units in and I just put a thermostat over there? And so I would go and I would basically put a thermostat over there and the thermostat would say something, but the room temperature never changed. Why? There's nothing to give substance to the hope. But you can have the best unit, but if you don't have a thermostat, And see, some of you, you just need to work on your thermostat. You need to take your mind and you need to start understanding that your mind can begin to have hope in it, that there can be something in it that begins to work in it, and that hope will begin to be something that says, you know what? I see other people's marriages getting better. I see other people's kids coming to God. I see other people's businesses succeeding. I see other people improving in health, and all of a sudden you begin to get some hope. But faith gives substance to things hoped for. And most people have had all hope beat out of them. It's just beat out of them. They don't have it in them. So what we know is that you've got to have hope. And you've got to have hope even at times when it seems hopeless, because that's what happened in Romans chapter 4 and verse 18. It says, to Abraham, the father of faith, when there was no hope, God gave him hope. When there was no hope, God gave him hope. And so in your life, you've got to begin to understand. And in Romans chapter 15 and verse 13, it says, and may the God of all hope fill you with hope. And for some of you, this is the prayer you need to pray. God, I tend to be so dark. I tend to be so negative. I tend to look at life in the darkest lens, in the most difficult way. Can you fill me with hope? Can you give me hope for my marriage? Can you give me hope for my kids? Can you give me hope for my health? Can you give me hope for my business? And some of you, you need to do that, because it says it at the end of that, and God will abound towards you with all hope according to the Holy Spirit. And some of you, that's the prayer you need to pray. You need to pray that God would fill you with hope. No, what I'm seeing right now, it's not my destiny. There's something bigger. No, what I'm going through right now, it's not the end. It's a chapter in the book. It's not the last chapter in the book. And you start looking there. And for some of you, you need to lift your hands and just say, God, will the God of all hope fill me with hope? Because it is a hope problem. It's not a faith problem. I thought I'd get more than 4 amens with that, but I was hoping against hope. But see, in the middle of life, what we do is we understand that. Some of you that have ever really turned on TV and you go to those channels where there's preachers on TV, have heard the name Joel Osteen. Joel's one of the more famous speakers on TV right now. Now, I knew Joel's dad, John, very, very well. I don't know Joel. He's somebody I've met, but I don't know him, but I know John, his dad. But John was married to Dodie, and Dodie's just a wonderful woman of God, and she's just really, really a great woman of God. One day they were doing a conference, and Dodie's literally sitting in a section like over there on the front row, and she's surrounded by her daughters and daughters-in-law, and she just turns to one of them and says, hey, I need to get up and I need to go to the restroom. And so she sneaks out and she goes, but she doesn't come back. And one of the daughters says, well, where's Dodie? So she went to the restroom, and they knew she should have come back. And so one of them goes out, and they find that Dodie's in the restroom and she's passed out and she's hemorrhaging. And so immediately, they begin to get help. And one of Dodie's sons, one of Joel's brothers, is a surgeon. So they get him out of the meeting, and they go and they literally put her on the ambulance. They begin to rush her to the hospital. She's passed out. She's unconscious. They run tests. The tests come back before she even wakes up, and it's a form of cancer that is just devastating. Everything about the prognosis would be just devastating about it. And so when she wakes up, it was agreed that the brother, who was a doctor, would tell Dodie what she was faced with. And so when she woke up, he tried, but he's just overwhelmed because that's his mama there, and he knows what the prognosis is, and he can't get it out. And so literally another doctor comes in and says, Dodie, you have this, and gives her the prognosis. Well, Dodie stays in the hospital because she had lost some blood, and they're getting her blood levels back up. But then after a few days, she turns to her son, who's a doctor, and says, I need to go home. And he says, Mama, don't give up. She says, I'm not giving up. Says, well, Mommy, you need to stay here. We can do more. She said, I'll come back here as many times. Please understand something about faith. Faith is not denying reality. It's acknowledging God's bigger than any reality. So faith doesn't say there is no cancer. It just says God's capable of healing cancer. Faith is not a denial process. It's not closing your eyes and pretending that something's not there. That's not what it is. It's not that. It is something more profound than that. It's just acknowledging God in the midst of things that seem to be impossible, and it's acknowledging God in the midst of it. She said, no, I'll come back as many times as you need me. I'm not giving up. But as they were preparing for her to go home, she told some of her daughters, I'm going to stay in this room. You're going to move my bed into this room. And these are the pictures. Dodie loved horseback riding, said, I want to see me riding horses. She loved being with the grandkids. She wanted pictures of her and the grandkids. And if I could say something to some of you, once you give us grandkids, we don't care if you're in the picture. You've done your job. So don't be disappointed if, hey, can you step over here? We just want the picture of the grandkids. But she wanted all that, and they asked her, said, why are you so specific? She says, I want to see what my life's going to be. I'm going to ride again, and I'm going to be with the grandkids. See, that's what hope is. It frames the picture of tomorrow. It doesn't deny reality. It frames the picture of tomorrow. And some of you, you have no picture of tomorrow. You have nothing that you're seeing. You have nothing that you're running to. It's just get through today so I can get through tomorrow, to get through tomorrow, to get through the next day and everything. And how's that working for you? How much fun is that? How is just survival doing for you? But what God says is, hey, if you'll have faith, but you'll add hope to it, faith will begin to produce what hope begins to see. So how do you begin to just sort of edify your hope? Well, number one, just pray for it. We've already talked about it, Romans chapter 10 and verse 15, that the God of all hope will fill you with hope. For some of you, it needs to be your prayer. God, just give me hope. Man, just give me hope. I don't want to just always be the dark person. I want to have hope. And you begin to do that. You begin to see that. You begin to feel that. Another thing is choose hope over despair. Choose hope over despair. That's what David was doing when he said, why art thou cast down, O my soul? He says, why are you living down there? Hope thou in God. Someone says, well, I don't want false hope. Hope's better than despair on any day. It's just better. How discouraged do you want to live every day? How depressed do you want to live every day? Hope thou in God. Begin to choose and say, you know what? I'm going to choose to be ridiculously hopeful. Someone says, what will that do? Well, it usually irritates your relatives, so that's one plus, because they don't get it. But then another thing, talk about it. In Hebrews chapter 10 and verse 23, it says, let us hold fast the confession of our hope. Oh, I thought it was the confession of our faith. You start speaking your hope out loud. You start declaring what your hope is, and you start doing that. And then another thing, put yourself in a place where you're learning from God. Oh, I can learn from God everywhere. What I can tell you is you're more likely to learn from God being in church than you are at Toyota, Frito-Lay, Pepsi. Someone says, well, that's where I work. Yeah, take a devotional up there. But when you come here, we're all trying to learn together. When you put yourself in a learning place, you tend to learn. And then just learn this, to drop the anchor and say, I'm not going to let my mind go places it shouldn't go. Just not going to let it chase every negative. Well, this is just how I am. Don't stay that way. God came into your life to improve you. Be different. What I know is that faith has substance. But what it gives substance to is hope. If you have 100 pounds of faith and you have no hope, there's nothing for faith to give substance to. Grow your hope so your faith has something to live up to, created in your life.